Okay.
Okay. So I don't know what if you guys had discussed anything ahead of me jumping on, but I'm assuming everyone got the survey questions that I circulated.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what were you guys discussing prior to?
Well, I was making the case that this is such an important meeting or set of meetings that we should wait to be sure you're on. And we're going to wait to 7:15. We were sort of debating whether to keep talking or not. I mean, now that you're here, I do think that we've got an interesting set of contributions, both from Ward 3 Vision and Chevy Chase Voice, and we're going to be doing those interviews. I think that yours is really interesting on several counts. I think that I've worked up a bunch of an approach to questions, and Nash has too. So I can just kick it off with a few observations about what you contributed, Lisa.
Okay, you want to do that? So let me just say for my part, how I was thinking maybe we want to do tonight.
Oh, sure.
Is maybe just kind of what the way you're going, Peter, is talk about our general observations as opposed to getting into the nitty gritty and fine tuning, because we're at such a broad stage and we still have the interviews to go from Chevy Chase Voice and Ward 3 Vision. I'm just really hesitant to fine tune anything until we get all of their considerations in.
Yep.
And then too, I think if we just kind of give our general thoughts about, the directions we're going as a group, we could provide that back to the ANC and they still have an opportunity to weigh in, which is what I asked them to do today. But, and I'm hoping, commissioners, you all got a chance to look at all the questions as well. I looked at everybody's and I do think we got some good stuff on the table. So Peter, you want to start out?
Sure. In the set of questions that I tried to structure, I do think that asking some very broad scene setter question at the top is a very useful one. And I thought that on a double count, your first off question, Lisa, and the setup that we're going to assume that this thing that is out of our control, the city, is going to move forward, I think is a reasonable way to approach it. We don't endorse, we don't oppose, we just say these are the circumstances, right? Yeah. I think that is wise, and I think that asking a question that sort of says, give us your overall stance in relationship to this project is wise. What I tried to do at the top of mine is sort of say, let's stand back a minute. We're not just talking about the community center library. We're talking about Upper Connecticut Avenue, and we're not just talking about this year and next year. We're talking about 25 years, and the world is changing. But so that's observation one. Observation two is that when I got to the issue of affordable housing, it's not easy to do in one or two questions. It feels like we need to say, well, what do you think of it in this circumstance? And what do you think of it in that? And I just don't know how people feel about that kind of approach. I'm not married to any single question, but that kind of a, give us your view, within this circumstance, within that circumstance, So anyways, those are my two observations. Other commissioners.
Okay, well, I'll explain where I came from. I'm probably going to be a little bit of an outlier here, but and that's fine. But maybe it's a little bit of a devil's advocate we can talk about. But I only did a few questions because I wanted to focus on the questions I thought would be most likely to affect the our RFP process. And so I'm kind of voting for these questions as being, for me, the most important ones, recognizing other questions need to be asked. And I like some of the background that some of the other questionnaires have. And one thing I particularly liked was the 10-point thing, where you have 10 points to assign different priorities. I did that a little more crudely with just rank them, but I think there's a lot to be said for the 10-point plan, except that I think what's missing from that, and I saw that in Lisa's, and I saw it also in the Ward 3 vision. I think that height of the building ought to be in that mix, because this is a big issue. And if I think there are people out there who would rather have a taller building if it means more affordable housing. And there are other people out there who are saying, well, I would rather have less affordable housing and a lower building height. And I think that's a big question. And I think that's something that can shape the RFP. So I had that in my question like that. I think height of the building ought to be in there. Finally, I purposely did not ask the question of whether you want affordable housing or not. And I'm going to make a little argument for it, which I probably will lose, but that's all right. My reason for not asking that question is that we live in a democracy, not a surveyocracy. And to me, this question was settled in the last election by the council member and by the mayor. The council member said he wanted it, affordable housing, in this very site. And he said he won this area by 75% of the vote. And the mayor has run on this in a general way. And so that's settled. Number two, let's say, I mean, to me, it's a wasted question, because it's going to be in there anyway. And so we want this short. That does nothing to help decide anything. And if it comes back, which I doubt it will, but even if it comes back that nobody wants affordable housing, well, they're going to do it anyway. And so it's just going to make us lose credibility on things that we can control, in my opinion. So that's why I did not put it there. And I would argue against asking the question of whether or not you want affordable housing. We should rather focus on what we can have some influence on. Okay, that's it for me.
Good.
Bruce, do you want to reply to that, or should I? I mean,
Well, I don't want to reply to that per se. Go ahead, then I'll follow you.
Jim, I couldn't disagree with you more. I think we have to ask the community essential questions. That is an essential question. Whether we can implement that or not is a different question. But the notion that we do not ask fundamental questions, talk about loss of credibility, that would be a stake in the heart of this survey from my point of view.
So just to reiterate what I mentioned to you in a quick email before we started the meeting, working with the consultants, I have drafted a questionnaire, which I'm holding on to until we do the meeting, so I can take on board what the groups have to say, just in terms of process for me, that works. And then I'll share this then, and we'll be informed by those meetings. The consultant, Susan's here. Anna was trying to log on. I don't know if Anna is on.
Anna's here.
Okay, hi, Anna. Anna's here. And Steve was going to try to log on as well. As we have agreed, the consultants are here to serve all commissioners in helping shape questions. So to the extent now that you've been thinking about your questions and would like help in terms of shaping them and looking at the methodological issues, I know Anna, Steve, and Susan are readily available to help all commissioners on that. One thing that emerges for me, and to your point, Lisa, about talking broadly about how we're looking at this, and as opposed to getting into specific questions tonight, is the question about, and Peter was alluding to this, to what extent is this a narrow survey focused on what is on offer by the city right now, which is the redevelopment of the civic site, the community center and library with affordable housing? That's what the community right now is focused on. It's very true that the small area plan is a 15-year or thereabouts project for redeveloping 4 blocks of Upper Connecticut Avenue. We all know that. And it's true that it's very important, I think, to have the longer term development of the small area plan in mind. At the same time, accomplishing that kind of survey can be very long because there are many things we'd want to ask about concerning that bigger development. So my question, it kind of gets down to what extent are we focused here on what's on the table, basically, what the city is proposing to do, and having in mind our 2 objectives, capture folks' key concerns and get input for our RFP process. That's just kind of a basic question I have for the commissioners and those listening in terms of how we focus this or not, or how we look at it more broadly.
Well, I'm sorry, Lisa, I mean, you're the.
Bruce, I'm not sure how to answer your question because I think that's what we've been doing the whole time. So, I will say from my perspective, in terms of my draft, and you guys have that, my first section kind of captures the concern. So it kind of talks a little bit more broadly about, where there might be issues of concern. And I don't know if I have in the draft, but on that first section, I think actually, I can't remember. I've been working on so many things. But what I know I did on the second section, which talks about the elements, is kind of the intro into this section. Does assume that that the city is going to proceed with its plans in terms of redeveloping the library and community center with the placement of affordable housing. And this section is designed to capture what the community views as its core, most important element. So, and I just did that very quick, it would be a lot more refined. So that's where I'm coming from with this. I think it meets the objectives that we started with in the beginning of the whole process. And actually looking at what everyone has developed and the questions, you guys did an excellent job. And I think we all are really kind of hitting on the same thing. It's just a matter of organizing, and it's a matter of which question captures what we're really trying to say. So I think we're there. Jim, you had transportation stuff that I hadn't thought of. So I think that's great that we can add that in there. In mine, you'll see I tried to organize it into headers. So like density, lot coverage, height, along with, here's question 1, question 2, question 3 regarding those subjects. So I'm trying to organize it that way too. Now that I have everybody's, I can go in and kind of like, if you guys like that format, add in, because I would like to see like my questions and Peter's questions, and I'm just using Peter as an example, combined on height. So, because he had a lot of good stuff in there on the affordable housing. He had a lot more than I did. And I would like to kind of look at that and say, wow, this is a better question, or this is where we need to go. I think that's what we can take our time a little bit and do. So Bruce, I know you haven't submitted your stuff, but it's critical that you do, because that's the part that we're going to be doing. And if the consultants have helped you draft that, that's fine. But there's also going to be a lot of, refining of our questions at the end. But I think we need to see that, immediately up front, so that we can start putting this stuff together, because that's what we're going to be doing. And it's not going to serve this group well, and it's not going to serve the commission well to have that at the last hour. Let
me just weigh in on that. I hear you. We have the interviews, I understand, scheduled for Thursday and Friday.
Yep.
With the 2 groups. So I was thinking we would have those done by now, and they could feed into what we're doing, just in terms of process, taking input, and then developing our questions seem to be the right thing, but I understand we're on an expedited schedule. In any event, mine will be forthcoming very soon. I look forward to seeing everyone else's. I haven't had a chance to review all of yours. Let me ask you this question. How many questions, Lisa, do you have on your survey, your draft?
I don't know, maybe 12, maybe 10 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're thinking it's a 10 or 15-minute survey?
Probably. I mean, they're not very complicated questions.
Right.
Yeah, definitely no more than right now, I would say, without the demographic questions, I don't think it would even be 10 minutes.
Right. Right. Okay. And Peter, you're in about the same time frame?
Oh, no, I look, I didn't do a count. No, I've got 6 or 7 pages. It's there are a lot of questions. I don't propose that this is this is the roadmap for the actual survey. It's a question. I give it a lot of examples of, particularly with affordable housing, of where what will you think about affordable housing at the site if X was shown to your satisfaction? What do you think if Y was shown to your satisfaction? Now, we don't need to do every one of those, but I mean, so I don't think what I've submitted so far doesn't represent what I think the final product should look like.
And that the same is true for me, but in the opposite way. I did not intend my draft questions to be in any way the final draft, but that they were those were the questions I thought were most important to ask, and so I asked them with that intent.
Lisa, it might be good to get Susan and Anna's input just in terms of their thinking about questions and parameters for questions that could be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, we should, I don't have a problem with you sharing with them the email and the documents that I sent out, and let them have at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yep. And we're, obviously we're all available if they have questions by email or by phone. But, I think we need to start, all of us start looking at where we're all trying to go and try to narrow it down. And, and just in terms of the groups, I think we all can start on our process without, finalizing a final decision and incorporating their input as well. So,
so do we want to start that conversation right now? Because there are a couple of ways, there are a couple of examples of question approaches that I've wondered all along what Susan, Anna, and Steve would think of. I mean, again, it's not the particular language that I'm so interested in as that, does this kind of question work, or is it bound to create it's not going to work? I mean, so do we want to go back and forth about that a little bit now, or
we can.
Okay, so let me just, so there, to the three consultants, an example of a question from what I provided is this, and my question is not, do you like the question or don't like the question, but does this kind of question work for you? So it starts with something like, what do you think about building affordable housing as part of the development of a new community center and library at their current site? 1 is strongly opposed, 5 is strongly support. What would you think about building affordable housing as part, and then there's this follow-on, which is, what would you think about building affordable housing as part of the development of a new community center and library at their current site, if it was shown to your satisfaction that there were no or only a few other sites in the Chevy Chase ANC community to build affordable housing? Or again, what would you think about building affordable housing as part of the development of the new community center and library at their current site, if it was shown to your satisfaction that most teachers, firefighters, police officers, store clerks, waiters, service providers who work in Chevy Chase can't afford to live here without taking a financially unwise, the financially unwise step of spending more than 30% of their income on housing. I just, this asking a general question and then putting conditions on it, does that ring a does that ring a bell with you, either positive or negative? Like this is the high road to trouble. Susan.
You're muted, Susan.
Yeah, I was having a hard time following some of the details. So just so in answer to your question, I don't think it's necessarily problematic to ask people to weigh in on, different scenarios. I think those questions in particular were quite wordy.
Yeah.
I think you need to be just quite, really straightforward and be very mindful, of being leading, right? So, just as neutral as possible, do you support this? Yeah, yes or no, or this. So,
yeah.
and you don't necessarily have to ask a separate question for each one of those. Like you could have a general question: do you support, affordable housing on this site? And then you get yes or no. And they say, are there any conditions under which you would do it? And then you list and people check off. One thing, as long as I have the floor, and my colleagues, I don't know if Steve's on the call, but I think Anna is. But given the time and resource constraints, should we agree the no open questions? Because I think that's an issue of how you're going to analyze those and whether you have the staff. So if I'm just sort of hypothetical,
I think that's a great idea. Having gone through that survey that was all open questions, I mean, I really enjoyed it, but
no, we don't have the staff to analyze that. Yeah, and people don't write very much anyway.
Yeah,
they don't.
I would be fine with saying no open questions.
Okay,
I agree. We don't have, and you said it right. Susan, we don't have the personnel to analyze the responses. And if we don't analyze the responses, we're going to be in trouble.
Right. So don't, yeah. So.
So Susan, have you seen, you said that Peter's questions were a bit wordy. Have you seen those questions submitted already?
No, I have not. So I was just going based on what he was reading. So my feeling is if there are so many words in the question that I lose you, that's not a good sign.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just sent them while we were talking. Yeah, so they've got it now.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Good. And let me just say, Susan, I'm more interested in whether, a series of conditions work as a technique. I understand that I blather on too much, and I mean, we can tighten it up, but I mean, does the approach of a series of conditions work as a survey technique?
Yeah, or there are different, but I wouldn't necessarily have a separate question for each one of these, you could have a series of statements and have people check which, there's real estate on a 10 to 15 minute survey is very precious, right? So every question, we have to get it as tight as possible.
Okay, I think it's so the other technique that you see in Lisa's contribution is these long lists, rank, I mean, there's a question here about activities and features for the I guess this is the open space. There are how many are there? There are probably 15 or 20 of these, basketball, pickleball, tot lot, seating for social group, solitary seating, seating to watch sports, gathering for Chevy Chase Day, farmers market, art show, etc. Is there, does that kind of thing work as a survey technique, or does it, after a certain number, does it just freak people out and they don't, again,
Can I jump in here, Peter? As a
Sure.
designer, I can tell you that what that works for is to give the designers a menu from which to work. And they will work from that menu, and they'll see that lots of people like this and few people like that, and all that, and they'll work from that to create a design. You can't survey a design into being, but you can create a menu for the professionals to use.
So, but hold it. So, Ron, you're saying that's a good thing.
If the goal is to inform the design, it's a good thing. If the goal is to have a precise program of the 10 elements, then maybe it's overkill.
Yeah, got it.
But I think in terms of information that goes to the designers, it's a good thing. They'll find out that that people really don't care about farmers markets. They want pickleball,
Okay, fine.
that sort of thing.
And how important is it to you to have comparability between the design elements in this survey and the design elements that was asked? I forget which one it was. A previous survey asked about that. Do you want comparability?
Yeah.
You mean the community center?
No,
I'm not sure what
you DMPED survey.
Oh, I mean, there's only so many activities that you do outside. I mean, they'll combine, they'll take it all in, and they'll use it. I think you can overthink this section of it.
But hold it. I mean, actually, Susan raises an interesting point, which is maybe there are questions that would help guide us, and then we could refer back to these other surveys. I mean, we do have some survey results on this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Well, then put those
from
things,
2018, 2017.
add those things to this list. Get it all in there. While I have the floor here, the other thing I raised my hand on was, Peter, for your question about the what if the affordable housing is rented to certain types of folks. Seems to me that if each section of this has some sort of intro that defines the critical terms, like what is affordable housing, who lives in it, you can then streamline the question.
Got it.
Because the information people need is there. That's why, as I've said to you guys in the past, that brevity is great, but not at the expense of setting a very firm factual context for these questions, because these questions need to be fact-based and not just amorphous.
Yeah, I agree. And we can, I think, do that in a couple ways, including, links to the, definitions. But I do think we need to do that.
Just to go back to Susan's point, and Peter, to build on that a little bit, we do have the DMPED survey. Lisa, perhaps you drew on the different features and facilities that DMPED included when it queried the public. No, well, there is that already, that if we have that list, and we drew on it for the drafts questionnaire that I've done, just to have that comparability, because you can go back and you can look at what people said on the DMPED survey, you can look what they said on this survey, and you have additional information. If there are elements missing, critical elements missing, of course, we can put those in. The list already is fairly substantive. It's fairly long. Or in other words, it's fairly complete in terms of features and facilities. But that would give comparability and give an additional set of data points harking back to that survey.
Yep.
I have a question and comment about what you did, Lisa. One thing that I really liked was that you had square footage for all the ways that the Civic Corps is being used right now.
No, I stole that from Ward 3 Vision. Yeah.
I
We'll go-
think I think that's really important information because my sense is that that is one of the big issues here is, will we have the same amount of space and how will it be used? And knowing where we are now is really important. But you know, I would, you have that as number one. That's not really a question. It's number one listed, but it's just information. But I would think that after that, you would want to ask people questions like, do you want more devoted to this or less? Because that is really what we're facing, it seems to me. That's what, and I get the sense that a lot people really care about that. People, whether you want affordable housing or whether you don't, this seems to come up a lot. But instead you have, well, what activities and features do you have? That's a long list. And I was told before, don't get into that. That's a programming issue. That's for the Department of Parks and Recreation to sort out. So that my preference would be to follow up that great information with something more focused along the lines of, look, this is what it is now. Do you want, maybe make it more general or something? You want more or less devoted to this? Something like, I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know what the rest of you think about that, but
I think there's a huge danger here, which is we start getting into, wait a second, the tot lot is going to lose 45 square feet. I'm against that. You know, I mean, I think quantifying this thing is like I mean, and in fact, if in fact it is true that we have 60% open space now, there's no way this project is going to do all the things that we're talking about it doing, and it's going to have 60%, only 40% building occupancy of the site. It just, you know, so if we get into a debate over square footage for each of these things,
okay, Peter, that's, you know, you may well be right, but that all that, what that tells me, it's all the more important though that we try to deal with this issue somehow. Yeah. Because the decision about how this very valuable space is used, I think, is really important. We've got to somehow get at that. I don't know how, but I see that as really, really key here.
Separate question, Lisa, Peter, and Jim. How do you address the community concern over the potential size of the building?
Yeah. Well, what I mentioned this earlier, Bruce, the way I try to deal with that is I list 4 priorities: open green space, parking, the height of the building, and the number of affordable housing units. Those are 4 trade-offs. And I don't want to ask people, well, what do you want? You know, it means, which do you want? Which is more important to you? Because I think there's some people who would say, you can have a tall building. That doesn't bother me at all. I want more affordable housing. Other people are going to say, affordable housing matters, but green space matters more. But I want a lower building, you know, but we've got to, those are trade-offs. And the more information we can get on what matters more or less, the better we can represent the community to the RRFP.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like the way you did that, Jim. And I do think it's important that, or what I prefer or would like to show, and you know, I know all of this is tricky to do, is to make sure people understand the trade-offs.
Right.
Because you're right. I mean, somebody might say, I want affordable housing, but I'm not willing to trade off height.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, whatever the community's response is, that's fine. But I do like being able to try to convey what the trade-offs are. I think that's important.
So this is good methodological question, I think, for Susan and Anna. I think Steve has also joined. How easy is it to capture trade-offs?
You know, there's in one of the questions, and this is off of the Ward 3 vision, or actually, I don't want to say Ward 3 vision, the one that Ron Eichner had submitted a while ago. There's a couple in there where he, or the authors, I think, did a really good job of explaining the trade-off. I don't remember how long it was. I don't think it was overly long, but it was a really good explanation of, you know, some people are in a community are asking for this, but here's, you know, maybe a consequence of that. Here's a trade-off for it. I think you just have to have the right language to be able to explain it. You know,
Doesn't the
simplistic.
10 points, don't the 10 points you assign to these different priorities do that?
No, it was, and Ron maybe could speak to it. It was an explanation in the question. So it was a question asking, like, let's just take building height, for example. But then it kind of explained by maybe having, if you would like lower levels and you don't oppose affordable housing, you know, lower levels in terms of building height will produce less affordable housing. So it was just something that was kind of concrete, well said, and then, you know, you select your answer.
I'd have to go back and try and find that, Lisa. I'm not sure which thing you're referring to, but
Yeah.
I would just like to throw in here that it's even more complicated in terms of the variables than you guys are giving it credit for, because this is not one building. This could be, given the zoning, this could be one fat 4.5-story building, and that will be the most you could build on this site. This could be a 8-story building on one end of the site and a 3-story building on the other end of the site with a bunch of open space. That might be a totally different experience. And, you know, so I'm not sure, and I really would love to hear from the experts if you have any experience in this. How do you get to those potential variations without images to discuss with people? I don't know how you get people to understand that that there's a process and there isn't one question of, do you want a big building here or a small building? It's much more complicated. To say nothing of the trade-off with affordable housing if you build less.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I know in market research or in consulting, they have very sophisticated ways of doing what they call discrete choice modeling, you know, discrete choice analysis, where, you know, people are, you know, given, you know, there are certain, let's say, features, and they, you know, very quickly say, do they like that? Do they like that? But we can't do that. So I think I'd like to talk to my colleagues about, you know, what the best way is to get at this, just bearing in mind that people are not experts. You know, just you can always ask a question. It doesn't mean that they're really, and you can say it straightforward. You know, the average person in this community is not maybe going to like have strong opinions about some of the details. They may have a few things, you know, I'm afraid, I'm just like, instead, if we're trying to keep this to 10 to 15 minutes and, you know, like how much detail do we need to throw at them?
Mm-hmm.
Is it enough just to get their preferences and priorities for the site? Know what they're for and against, you know? I'm just throwing it out there because I am afraid this can
That's my
get too,
understanding.
yeah, it can get too complicated.
I agree with that, Susan, because not only do we have to deal with a short survey, not a lot of time, and a limited amount of knowledge base, but then also this, how much sway does the survey have anyway on the RFP process? To me, if it gets too refined and tricky, less. But if we have a blunt instrument, like we say, 90% of the people here don't want to lose a square inch of green space.
Yeah.
Oh, now that might cut that would cut through some of this stuff, and that matters to people. So I agree with your overall idea there.
So
Bruce.
one way of addressing that, Ann and Steve jump in, is as we've talked about, ranking a selected number of variables with respect to, let's say, outdoor and indoor features of the community center and the library that then would allow the kind of discrete segregation of priority features, Jim, that you're talking about. And Ann and Steve, you're on, but you haven't come in yet. Feel free.
No, I think that's easily doable. I mean, I think we have, there's some good questions or choices that probably have been agreed upon, and it's easy to rank order them and get some fresh input and say, look, this is what we want, this is what people want, and we also get feedback on, the overall sense of the community. That's what we need to get these folks' opinion on. There can always be other surveys, unless I'm mistaken, about once we have images of proposed developments, get people's input on things like that. Unless we are mistaken, but just saying. We got to keep this to like 10, 12 minutes max. It really can't drag on. You're not going to get any feedback.
Okay, we have about 6 minutes left. We had a couple of members in the audience that had some questions in the chat. I'm going to ask Andrea or Cal, do you guys want to come offline and ask your questions directly?
Sure. And it's not so much questions as it is comments, and I have two of them, one of which I've said in a previous meeting. It might have been at a regular ANC meeting, but to the point of binary questions, I think those should be avoided. I completely shut down when I run into somebody say, please choose between this or that, or yes or no. And I think we already have a polarized issue here. And I don't want, even though the questions themselves aren't really responsible for the polarization, let's offer them, a range. That's why I like on a scale of 1 to 5, and you have the favorable, not favorable, or want it but not want it range for those questions.
Sure.
And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that I heard somebody talking about ranked choices again, and I want to also strongly recommend against that. Because I'd rather see every one of the items listed with a range like that says, how do you sit with this feature or this issue, and then give them a range so they're not having to play them off against each other. Especially because we've had 2 surveys in which that method was used, in which affordable housing went to the very bottom of the list by a wide margin. And so I don't want to have to rank my choices, but I do want to weigh in on how I feel about each of the choices. So it makes the survey take a little bit longer to take, but then you'll get a better read on where the sentiments are. And you might put a note in this: if we vote high on everything, you kind of nullify or vote low on everything, you kind of nullify your choices. So, don't make them all the same. I'm sure there's a way to word that. So those are my 2 main comments for now.
Okay, thank you. Andrea?
I don't really have that much to say other than I had envisioned and thought this was the way it would work, that the survey professionals would sort of go over the questions with a fine-tooth comb and possibly redraft them where necessary to avoid the problem of leading, because I know from my own experience that it's really hard to write non-leading questions.
Well, I
Yep,
think,
that's our vision too.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep. We have the same vision.
They
We're
just haven't
just
seen
trying to get them as narrow, to give them something to work with, but absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just speaking for myself. I just got these questions about maybe 30 minutes ago, and I saw them, printed out some of them. I couldn't open Lisa's, so I'm happy to look at these and rework some of these. And we have many things already. Yeah, so I don't know what the issue was with Lisa with your attachment, but maybe you can help me with that. I
Well,
couldn't
Lisa
open it.
sent it in, Lisa sent it in pages,
Pages, yeah.
and
Okay, I'm not. I
Just
haven't.
export it, just export it to Word. I mean,
Yeah.
it's simple to do.
Okay, it'd be nice if we could just work in Word, but yeah, that's fine.
I can
Yeah,
send you
I
a
work
Word
in
doc.
pages. Sorry.
She thinks it's easier if you work in pages.
Yeah. Okay.
Lisa, I've got another just general question, and this is with regard to something Ron was talking about, others have commented on. It's a short survey. There's some explanation that needs to be provided in terms of the terms that we're using and so forth. Is this best done with a short preamble that introduces these various elements, touching on things like affordable housing, but also talking about things that the survey respondents need to know concerning the current state of development, right? So if these are things that maybe you've already built in, I will see them when I take a look at your documents, but it's something that's been very much on my mind, because behind every question, we all know, is some level of awareness about the issue the question is asking about, right?
Yeah.
You can't go on and explain it. And it's very important not to enter any information in that would seem to be leading. But at the same time, there has to be enough there so people have context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like little preambles personally. That's just me, but we'll see what everybody comes up with. But I think that is one way to do it.
And it does shorten the question then. If it's in a preamble, you've answered the basics, and the question then supposes that people have read that, or at least they can go back to it and take a look at it.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other issue. Anything where we would have a link that people would click on to find out more. That's a double-edged sword in that it's nice to give them a link. On the other hand, if there are too many, or even if there's one in there and people have to click on something and read it, it takes time. And it discourages people from moving through a survey expeditiously. For example, the small area plan. Obviously, many people haven't read the small area plan. They don't know about the small area plan. The preamble can give a brief tag and explain what it is. But to the extent that anything presupposes that they're really familiar with that, then it becomes difficult because they'd have to click on it and read it. And then it becomes, kind of a bottomless pit in terms of time spent reading the small area plan.
Yeah. Okay.
right, I have a question before we break.
Yep.
What is our homework assignment before the next meeting? Is it to go through, should we go through all of these surveys that are submitted, and Bruce's was coming, and then kind of come up with our ideal best of the best?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to continue to keep refining them, and I will, now that I have everybody's, I will put what I got. I'm gonna try to put them in headers, so like things that address affordable housing, things that address height, because I think that's the best way to go through and look at them and have them all lined up and say, okay, we have the major things, we just need to ask them better, or maybe we have some things that are missing and we need to include. Or here we need to eliminate. So I'll try to make it as concise as possible and send you guys out a new document. I'll do that. I'll work on that tonight. But do keep in mind, we also have Chevy Chase Voices document out there, possibly Ward 3 visions to come, and the 2 interviews to do and analyze as well. So just keep that in mind as we go through it.
Well, I have a Ward 3 vision document.
Lisa, you asked if we wanted to give you anything else before the interview, and Our considered opinion is we've given you a lot of crap. That's all you're gonna get.
Okay. So
We'll go.
are you talking about the document Ron did with survey questions? What are you talking about, Jim?
Yeah.
I guess-
Okay.
Yeah.
It is Ron talking. I mean, he's, yeah, I mean, so you're not going to give us another survey. We get it.
That's
No,
fine. That's cool.
no, I did a slight revision of the civic core section to reflect the changes OP made to the zoning proposed for that, and then we'll come be interviewed.
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Ron's document meant then to be Ward 3 vision submission.
That's what I wanted confirmation.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
That's how I took it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
I
I mean,
just wanted to be sure because I think it came from you, Ron. as-
Yeah, it originally did, but if there are other issues you guys want us to weigh in on, you want to talk about on Thursday or Friday, whenever it is we're meeting, absolutely.
To be
but
clear, Ron, we want you to talk to us. I mean,
Yeah.
we're trying to be as neutral as we can be here, and just you tell us what. So just be prepared to do that. So
I don't think I've been shy about that.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah,
No.
really, is there anything new that Ron hasn't said already? Would he even need to bother with it? I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to touch that.
I do think that
Okay.
Lisa, you ought to get. I mean, Bruce, you ought to give Lisa your document too, so that can get circulated with the other ones. We've all sort of put cards on the table. Let's see the one that you've come up with the consultants.
yeah, no, I'm not, I have no problem with that. I did want to do the process piece of listening to people and getting their input
Oh
Uh,
yeah, we're gonna
and then factoring that in. So,
Well, let me just say that we're all going to do that, but we're running on time. And whether we do that at the end or the beginning or whatever, it might look more, friendly and transparent if we say we wait and then we gather questions. We're all adults here. We're all big boys and girls. We're going to include everybody's input, but we have got to start looking at stuff. We don't have a lot of time. So if you want us to look at your stuff, send it to us.
you're gonna get it, and we're gonna have the interviews on Thursday and Friday, right?
Yep, but then you got to write them up. They got to be, we got to get the pieces. So just because we're having the interviews on Thursday and Friday, and I'm not going to be at Friday's interview, doesn't mean that all of the survey committee is going to have the information.
Right.
So we need to
send
get
it now, Bruce.
get that done, get the major points bulletized, and get that to the entire ANC.
Are we going to record these interviews, Lisa?
No, I don't think we decided we would not.
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
So we should be taking notes then.
Absolutely. So pretty much what's in that interview guide, the last part of it, where we have somebody taking lead on interviews, somebody taking lead on writing notes or taking notes and writing up the major points of the interview, and then distributing that to the entire ANC.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So I'm not going to keep us, guys. I think we got a lot to do before our next Tuesday meeting. We got a lot to, go over ourselves. Please, if you got questions on individual commissioner questions or the organizational questions, just go on and start firing that. I can't say enough to copy members of the survey team so that we're all hearing the same thing pretty much real time. With that, have a good week on recess, even though we're not on recess, we're still working. Maybe in different locations. I want to get out and go look at the inland waterway tonight. See
All
ya.
right. Turn off record. Turn off record.
I will. Hang on.